Let's break it down. When people hear Russia is forcing the world to pay in rubles, it sounds like a dramatic headline, like the dollar is finished and Moscow just flipped a switch. The truth is more complicated, and honestly, more interesting. Russia isn't replacing the dollar globally, but it is trying to do something very specific: reduce its dependence on Western money systems, build sanctions-proof payment routes, and turn its commodity exports into leverage, not just over energy, but over currencies. I'm Imran, a Middle East-based analyst who follows global economics, tech, and politics. My goal is to give you short, honest breakdowns so you can make up your own mind. So let's start with the key question: what exactly is Russia doing? The core move began after 2022, when sanctions made it harder for Russia to receive and use dollars and euros in a normal way. Russia's problem wasn't only can buyers pay, it was, even if they pay, can we reliably access and move that money without it being blocked, frozen, or delayed? So Russia started pushing a new model. If you want certain Russian exports, especially gas in earlier phases, you don't just wire euros to a normal account. Instead, you use a controlled payment channel. The most famous version involved Gazprom Bank. Buyers would pay into an account, conversion steps would happen inside the Russian-controlled banking structure, and the final settlement would be in rubles. That's why people call it gas for rubles. And even later, Russia tightened the framing. Instead of helping buyers convert easily, the system increasingly shifted toward we receive rubles. Meaning you figure out the ruble liquidity, you build the mechanism, you take the friction. Now, important point. Russia didn't force every country on earth into rubles. It targeted specific pressure points where Russia had leverage and where buyers had fewer alternatives. And the leverage came from one thing: commodities. Oil, gas, fertilizer, metals, grain, the stuff economies literally run on. So what does that look like in practice today? Here's the reality. A lot of Russia's trade has moved into non-dollar settlement, but not always pure rubles. In many cases, it's a mix. China and Russia increasingly settle in yuan and rubles, and Russian officials have even claimed the share of trade settled in national currencies is extremely high, basically almost all of it. India's Russian oil trade has involved multiple pathways, including payments that sometimes touch the yuan or the dirham and then get converted along the way before Russian sellers end up with rubles. Other buyers use regional currencies where possible, because the main objective is to avoid the dollar-euro plumbing that sanctions can choke. So the big story isn't just ruble payments, it's currency rerouting, and Russia's strategy is, if the West controls the pipes, we'll build new pipes, and we'll make buyers adapt. Now let's talk about Europe, because the competitor script you shared claims Europe is warning about a currency disruption spiral. Is Europe worried? Yes, but not because the ruble is about to replace the euro. Europe is worried because this kind of trade rerouting creates a long-term normalization of non-Western settlement. And once a payment network becomes normal, it's hard to reverse. Think of it like this. At first, countries shift settlement because they have to. Then they build the infrastructure. Bank accounts, clearing routes, compliance teams, currency desks. Then it becomes routine. And once it's routine, you start asking, why did we rely on dollars for this in the first place? That's the network effect risk. Not everyone loves the ruble. But everyone becomes comfortable doing big commodity deals without the dollar. And that matters because the dollar's power isn't only about being a reserve currency. It's about being the default language of trade and finance. Every time a large commodity flow gets priced, paid, and settled without dollars, it slightly reduces dollar demand at the margin. Now, let's slow down and be fair. There are limits to Russia's ruble zone dream. Big limit number one, the ruble is not a fully open global currency. Russia uses capital controls and tight management. That stabilizes the ruble domestically, but it also makes the ruble less attractive as a global store of value. Big limit number two, liquidity. If you're a major importer and Russia says pay in rubles, you need a deep ruble market to buy rubles efficiently, without huge spreads, delays, or legal risk. That's not easy outside specific corridors. Big limit number three, trust. Currencies are trust instruments. If you fear sanctions, political risk, or payment freezes, you might prefer using a third currency like yuan or dirham rather than holding large ruble balances. So Russia's success is not the ruble becomes king. Russia's success is we forced a fragmentation and we made sure we're not trapped inside Western finance. That's the real win they're chasing. So what's the end game? Russia is trying to do three things at once: sanctions, proof revenue, get paid in ways that are harder for Western systems to block, currency insulation, reduce exposure to dollar-euro systems where the West has enforcement reach. Strategic leverage. If you want Russian commodities, you're forced into Russian-friendly payment rails, and that creates dependence. And there's a second subtle consequence. Russia's trade structure is increasingly tied to China's currency ecosystem. When Russia has a lot of yuan inflows, because energy exports to China are huge, it creates a yuan pool inside Russia. That's why we've seen moves like Russia issuing yuan-denominated bonds domestically. It's a way to manage that yuan liquidity and build financial structures around it. So when people frame this as ruble versus dollar, they miss the bigger picture. It's more like Western currencies versus a growing patchwork of alternative settlement zones, with yuan being the most important alternative node, and the ruble being Russia's domestic anchor. Now, what should you watch next, especially going into 2026? Here are 4 signals. Signal 1. Pricing language. Are more commodities being quoted in rubles, yuan, or local currency baskets, even when the seller isn't Russian? That's how normalization spreads. Signal 2. Payment infrastructure hubs. Watch where new clearing and FX infrastructure grows. Beijing, Dubai, Istanbul, and other centers that can intermediate between sanctioned and non-sanctioned systems. Signal 3. Sanctions escalation. If secondary sanctions expand, buyers will become more cautious. And paradoxically, that can either slow alternative payments or push them deeper underground into new channels. Signal 4. Ruble stability mechanics. Russia's central bank interventions and policy choices matter. If the ruble becomes too volatile or too controlled, it limits adoption. If it stays stable enough, it encourages routine use in certain corridors. Bottom line, Russia isn't forcing the whole world into rubles like some Hollywood plot. But Russia is using commodities to pressure buyers into Russia-controlled payment routes. And it's contributing to something bigger. A world where major trade flows can increasingly happen outside dollars and euros. Europe's fear isn't that the ruble becomes the new dollar. Europe's fear is that the West loses the currency choke points that made sanctions so powerful, because trade learns to route around them. And once the world builds the habit and the infrastructure to do that, it's hard to unbuild it. If this breakdown helped, subscribe, hit like, and share. And tell me in the comments, is this the beginning of a long-term currency fragmentation era, or will the dollar's network effect prove too strong to break?